everyone. Welcome back to another week of our July Singer Summer Sewing Camp. On this week's episode, I'm going to be teaching you all about embroidery. My name's Bethany. I'm a singer education specialist, and I'm really excited to get to share with you a lot of helpful information to get started with embroidery, like the best tips, the best tricks, the best practices, everything you need to know. So, are you ready to get started? All right, let's dive into some embroidery. There's a lot of different ways that you can do embroidery, but we're going to start with some of the basics and some of the most common ways that people get started with embroidery. A lot of times people want to embroider pre-made things like shirts, little tote bags, things that you already own. Some people like to embroider the fabric before they make it into something else. There's no right or wrong way, but we're going to talk about different techniques based on the way you want to approach your embroidery. The other thing we're going to talk about is placement with embroidery. This can really make or break a project. Okay, so placement of where your embroidery goes is extremely important, and we're going to talk about that. A lot of times people want to do the obvious, right? They want to place an embroidery on a shirt right here, which is totally fine, or right on a pocket. But let's sometimes think outside the box, like with this shirt here. The embroidery is around the waist to accentuate the smallest part of the waist and highlight that area of the shirt. I think this looks really nice. What are some other ways that you can do embroidery? For example, this button-down shirt right here has the embroidery following the button placket down the front of the shirt. Something a little different besides having it over the chest, over the heart. Another example would be this skirt. This is just a simple little black skirt. Already had the ribbon on it, but we added the embroidery to just jazz it up and dress it up a little more. And you don't have to go all the way around. It could just be across the front. Sometimes embroidering little kids' clothes is probably my favorite thing to do. And this is a really cute example here. Bring it a little closer, where we put the embroidery on the bottom corner of the front of the skirt instead of right in the center. Just another different placement idea. So just think outside the box and have a little fun with it. Again, there's no right or wrong way of where you can place it, but if you are going to center something right here in the center, you are going to need to make sure that you're putting it in the right place in your hoop. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute, because that's how we're going to make sure that our embroidery is nice and level and straight and exactly where we want it to go on our garment or our pouch or our bag or whatever we're working on, to make sure that we have a beautiful finished project. For today's tutorial, I'm going to be featuring the Singer Legacy SC300 sewing and embroidery machine. This machine will do both. I've already attached the embroidery arm. I've got my hoops set aside, ready for us to get started. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready to dive in. All right, let's first start talking about stabilizers. There are so many different types of stabilizers out there, some that I'm not even familiar with, and that's okay. And the more you do embroidery, the more you can explore those. But I'm going to show you some of the most commonly used and the ones that I use the most to get you started. And these are some of the ones that we're going to be using today. Okay, so I'm just going to hold these up. They're all kind of going to look a little similar, especially on camera, but I can tell the difference by feeling them, so you'll be able to kind of do that when you get your hands on them in person. This is a light cutaway, and this is a heavier duty cutaway. They look very similar, and I'm going to show you what I mean by cutaway. So there's tearaway stabilizer, which I'm going to show you, but there's also cutaway. Cutaway means that I can't tear it. I am going to actually have to cut around the design on the back after I've stitched out my embroidery design. So the best way to know that this is a cutaway is when I go like this and it doesn't tear. It's cutaway. All right. So this one right here looks very similar. It does have a slightly different texture feel than the cutaway, but it is a tearaway, and I know that because it tears. That simple. Then the one that I probably use the most, and there's different weights to some of these. Like this one's kind of a heavier one. This one's kind of a lighter one. There's different ones, weights to them, depending on what you're sewing, the type of fabric. But this is also a tearaway. But you'll notice, if you can tell on camera, maybe the sunshine coming in through the window will help you see that there's a shiny paper on this one. And basically, if I peel back that paper, let's see if I can get it started here in the corner. if I peel back that paper right here, this comes off and this is sticky. This is probably my most used stabilizer because of the convenience of it being able to stick right onto the back of my material. I don't have to pin anything. It's really fast. So whenever I can use a sticky tearaway, I absolutely will. Now, a lot of these will come in another color, like black, depending on the fabric and material that you're working with. So this could be an option for you as well, depending on your project. And then the last one I have here to show you is called Clear and Melt. Looks like a plastic sheet. You're going to pin it on. It will melt and melt away. And then another one that I have to show you is another one that I probably use the most. So I use the sticky tearaway. I use the sticky tearaway with a lot of my embroidery designs, almost all of them, to be frank. And then there's also this one here, and you can kind of see it's got a sheen on this side and it's matte on this side. This is a no-show mesh. This sheen is actually where you can put it down onto your fabric and use an iron to adhere it to your material, and then you can peel and then cut it out. Okay, now this is a must-have if you're doing any embroidery on a stretchy material. Like if I wanted to do embroidery on this shirt right here, this shirt or this dress of mine actually really stretches. It's a rib knit and it stretches. So if I wanted to put any sort of embroidery design here, I would absolutely need to use this no-show mesh on the inside here. And then I would also use a layer of the tearaway, sticky tearaway as well, or non-sticky, and I could just pin it on. But there's a lot to dive into. We're going to kind of go through some of those examples, but I just wanted to kind of briefly show you what some of these stabilizers look like and some of the more common ones you'll see out in the market and as you do more research in embroidery. So you might be thinking, Bethany, why are there so many different types of stabilizers? What's the point? If you really use this one and this one the most, then why do I need all these others? It really just comes down to what you're embroidering, the material that it is, and that's kind of it. You need to use the right stabilizers to help make your embroidery last. So I don't know about you, but I have had things embroidered by companies before on like a shirt pocket, a monogram. I don't have this example anymore. I've thrown it out since. But I got this beautiful shirt. It had my monogram on the pocket. I loved it. I washed it and then I didn't love it because they didn't use the right stabilizers. And that embroidery never laid flat perfectly again. And it was so wrinkled around the pocket and it just looked awful. And it was all because they didn't use a no-show mesh with the proper other stabilizer. This right here is what they should have had as their first layer of stabilizer because it was a knit t-shirt that was embroidered and they just used a tearaway or cutaway and that's it. So that is why I'm really making sure that you kind of have a good understanding of why there are so many different types of stabilizers, because you want your embroidery designs to last, especially if it's something that's going to be washed, like a shirt or a blanket. So this is a great starting point, and we're going to dive in a little more into how to hoop our material with our stabilizer, and we'll go from there. Okay, so for this first example, I have a piece of denim fabric. A lot of people like to embroider on denim, so I thought I would show you how to use the right stabilizer for denim. Now this denim does not have a stretch with it at all. You always want to double check and make sure because some does. So always check the stretch on your fabric. So because it doesn't have a stretch, I'm just going to use a sticky tearaway stabilizer, which I have a piece here. And I'm just going to tear this back and lay the sticky side down to the wrong side of my fabric. You want to put the stabilizer on the back side. And I always have a hard time getting it started. All right. Now, obviously, if you don't need a piece this big, you don't have to use a piece this big. So now that I've stuck it onto my denim fabric, here you go. I just put it right in the middle of this scrap piece of denim fabric that I had on hand. This is the front. This is the back. And it just sticks right on. Now, if I didn't have a sticky tearaway, I could use a regular tearaway or a cutaway, and I would need to pin it down. Now, here's a little tip for you. Pinning with straight pins is not going to do a very good job of holding it in place. You could also end up really poking yourself as you're trying to hoop. You don't want them to get in the way of your embroidery design. A little trick, if you need to pin stabilizer to your material, if you don't have a sticky adhesive or an iron-on, then I recommend using what's called quilting pins. I'm going to pull these apart and show them to you. It's just a safety pin. Can you see that? But do you see that it's got a little bend in it, a little curve in it? It just makes it a little easier for the bulk of the material. So I always keep these on hand. And these are great for pinning things, especially your stabilizer to your material. And you just want to pin around the outside edge away from where your embroidery design is going to be. Another thing that you can do, and some embroidery machines offer this feature, some do not. But if you know that this is where your embroidery is going to go and you don't have sticky tearaway, you can do a very big basting stitch around it with your non-adhesive or non-sticky stabilizer. So it would help hold it in place and keep the fabric really smooth on this side. So that is another tip, because when you're done, you can just remove the basting stitch. Now when it comes to hoops, you need to know what your machine comes with. But sometimes your machine may have other hoops that are available as well. So this machine does come with 2 different size hoops, but you can also purchase additional hoops over on Singer.com, such as the endless embroidery hoop. This allows you to continue to hoop designs like around that skirt I showed you earlier without having to completely remove the hoop, because it has a spring and it lifts up and you can shift your fabric. You can also get other sizes, like a 5x7 that doesn't come with this machine, but you can purchase it separately. For today's example, I'm going to use the largest hoop that comes with this machine so you can see just how easy it is to hoop with a small or large hoop. Now this is the front or the top of the hoop. We have the word Singer and it tells us how big the hoop is, which is a 260 by 150. We have this little spring right here. This is what releases the tension here. This is what you will tighten and loosen as well. And then this part right here is what attaches to the machine. Once you loosen this right here, you can lift out the center and set it aside. Now we want to place this under the fabric where our stabilizer is. So I'm going to place this down on my mat here. Here is my fabric with the stabilizer. I'm going to place that over the hoop. I know you can't see it, but you can kind of see that I've got the corners kind of marked out with my hands. And then you're going to take this inner piece and you're going to find the corners, line it up by just feeling it. Now, if you're struggling to get it pushed back in and matched up with the outside like it was before, it probably means that we need to loosen this little screw right here, because we are putting a thicker material through here. I'm going to loosen this a little bit, not too much. So we've got a little more wiggle room there. And I'm going to continue to kind of work this down in, really focusing on those corners. And now I'm going to close this shut. You want to make sure that your material is nice and smooth, that your fabric is on top of this bar right here, and I'll show you why when we get over to the machine. Nice and smooth, nice and taut. If you need to adjust this at all, you can. I think we've got it nice and tight. And then I also like to kind of go around with my hand and just kind of make sure that it's lined up, the inside piece is lined up with the outside piece this way. Okay? Just like so. That's hooping. That is hooping a piece of material that you already have stabilizer attached to, and we're ready to stick it on the machine. Okay, so now let's talk about hooping items that are pre-made, like this chambray dress I have here, and I want to put something here on this area. I don't always want to hoop this through the hoop, because depending on the fabric you're using, it can leave creases and marks. Also, if I'm going to kind of be moving it as well, that can be a variable. So sometimes, like when I made this little bag here, I can't take it apart, right? So how do you hoop something like this? And to be honest, the way that I hooped this was I kind of turned it inside out, and I used a different hoop at the time. I'm going to do my best to show you real quick on this example. And I had a smaller hoop, and I hooped it to a sticky tearaway that I put in the hoop, and then I put it down and I basted, and it was a whole thing. But that's how I was able to hoop and embroider on this small pouch that was pre-made. Okay, so sometimes you have to do a little finagling, and that's okay. And then I made a cute little lining to go with it, but after the fact. But for this, I'm going to show you a little trick on how to hoop without actually putting your fabric through the edges of the hoop, like we did with the other denim. So this is that same sticky tearaway stabilizer that I used on the last one, because again, I'm using a fabric that has no stretch. This is a non-stretch woven fabric. There's no stretch here, okay? And I'm going to take this, and this is the rough side. This is that paper side that you would normally peel off. And I'm going to place it down over my hoop, my outside hoop, and I'm going to take my inside hoop, find my edges. I may have to loosen this one as well. Give me a little more wiggle room. There we go. So we can get that other side. It's harder with the paper still attached, but we'll get there. There we go. All right. I'm going to clamp this shut. I'm going to make sure all of my corners are nice and level all the way around. Okay, now you're probably thinking, how do you get this stuck to this? Well, that's where I'm going to take just a straight pin, and I'm going to, across the top, just draw an X. I'm going to use this to remove that paper and reveal the sticky. Okay? Now, why would I not want to just remove the paper and then put all of the paper and then put it in the hoop? It's a great question. A fair question, but let me tell you, this sticky is pretty sticky, okay? It's meant to hold your material in place. You do not want that sticky residue getting on your hoop. It can really damage your hoop over time and make using this hoop in the future on other projects quite troublesome. And we don't really want to do that. So this is a way to be able to hoop without getting your sticky stabilizer sticking residue onto your hoop. So now I have a sticky surface, but it's not getting any sticky on my hoop. How great is that? And then I can take my garment wherever I want to hoop it, and I'm going to figure out, you know, I can mark on the fabric with a washable marker. I can use the marks on the hoop of where I want to place it and line it up and place it. Now I can tell on camera right now that that's not straight, and that's where you're going to take some time to really get it nice and straight and hoop it. And then I can do my embroidery design right down this. Now, something to keep in mind when you're looking at a hoop, there's these little marks all the way around that let us know and where placement is going to be on a hoop. And we have this little arrow here that shows that that goes towards where it attaches to the machine. Right here and right here is the center this way. Right here and right here is the center across. Now, you may be thinking, well, that doesn't really look like the center. It looks like there's more space up here than down here. And you would be right, but it's center between this point and this point. You have to account for where the foot is on the sewing machine and how much room it needs around here. So because this is going in the machine here, This is where the back of that foot is, so this is really considered the top of the hoop. This is considered the bottom, making this the center. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're trying to get the perfect placement for your design. You also need to keep in mind which way your design is going and how it needs to hoop. So, since this is going to go on the machine over here, I'm probably going to have my design going up and down, and I'm going to need to hoop going this way so that my embroidery design is going down the shirt like I want it to. Okay, so all of this will make more sense once we go over to the machine and we start putting hoops on, but I just wanted to kind of walk you through and show you this little trick of how to use sticky tearaway stabilizer in a hoop when this fabric is not actually hooped in it with it. Now this is a great way to do all sorts of pre-made garments and bags and everything to not actually have to put them in the hoop, especially for fabrics like a velvet, okay? If you put a velvet in this hoop right here along the edge like we did with this one, it's going to crush that velvet and leave a mark on your material. And unless you want the look of crushed velvet, it's probably not the design you're hoping for. So this is a great way to do that. All right, so let's go over to the machine and get ourselves set up for doing embroidery, either like this or like this, okay? Okay, so as I mentioned before in this video, I'm using the Singer Legacy SE300 sewing and embroidery machine. I did say at the beginning of the video I've already attached the embroidery arm, which I have right here. It just slides on and off, and there's another arm that goes on here for regular sewing. But when the embroidery arm is engaged, it is going to go into embroidery mode. And that means I also need to change the foot and ankle on my machine. So I'm going to pop off this general purpose foot, and I'm going to remove this ankle so I can attach this foot right here that comes with the machine. This is an embroidery, or also known as a darning foot, and we're going to be using this to set up our machine for embroidery. Something else to keep in mind when you're setting up your machine for embroidery is what type of thread to use. Now, I have a cotton thread in here from my last project, so I do know I need to switch this out for an embroidery design. Now, my preferred threads for embroidery are going to be a rayon thread. They typically look a lot like this. They're very shiny. They really pop on your fabric. Lots of fun colors to choose from. So I'm going to be choosing one of those for the design that I picked today. And then I also will be putting a rayon thread into my bobbin. And we're not going to be switching out the bobbin for every color that we have in our embroidery design. We're just going to stick with a white. And I have that already here. So you're going to want to use a white thread, rayon thread to put in your bobbin. Now it's time to hoop the machine. I'm going to find my hoop that I made earlier, and I'm going to find this little sidebar on the end, and I'm going to use that to follow into this guide here until this clicks into place. You want to make sure that as you're hooping that you do not get caught on your embroidery, your darning foot and needle. So you want to make sure they're in the up position. And as you slide this through, you want to make sure that you're clearing those. Sometimes you need to take the foot control, the presser foot here, and lift it a little higher to get over any bulk. I'm going to fold this back real quick, and I'm going to follow this through this, just like so. You are going to have to kind of give it a little push. Did you hear that click? That means it is in place, and I can move this fabric back. Now remember earlier when I was saying that we want to make sure the fabric is on top of that bar? It's so that the fabric is going up and over this arm. On the embroidery arm, this is what's going to move the embroidery hoop around to help create the design. One thing that's very important when setting up an embroidery machine is making sure that you have room for this arm to freely move about, okay? So for this machine, on this small table here, I want to make sure I have plenty of room for it to clear the wall and my windowsill here as it moves back and forth. So please keep that in mind as you're setting up your machine. You do not want this bumping into anything. Now that I've attached the hoop, it's asking me to calibrate it. So I'm going to hit yes. And this is going to move around and determine which hoop I have attached to it, which is the 260 by 150. So do you remember how I took out the red cotton thread that was in the machine? Well, I'm going to put another red thread in it, but I wanted you to see the difference between the two. This is a cotton. It may be hard to tell with the glare on the camera. Maybe if I move them back a little. And this is that rayon that has that nice sheen to it. So I'm going to be putting this red into the machine, and we're going to type out or stitch out Singer Sewing on this denim right now. What's great about most embroidery machines, especially this one, is it will walk me through the steps of what I need to do as it goes through the stitching process. So I do leave myself a little bit of a tail on my thread, and I'm going to lower my foot, I'm going to hit the play button on the front of the machine, and that's going to tell it to start. It's going to do a couple of stitches and then stop and have me trim my tail. See? It stops for me. It shows a little scissor mark or scissor on my screen. I'm going to trim that tail, and then I'm going to hit start again, and it's going to keep going. One thing that's important to note when you are doing embroidery is, especially when you're new to embroidery, is to sit and make sure that things are going like they should. You don't want your thread to get caught. That could cause it to break. It could cause a needle to break. It could cause your machine to jam. So I do recommend staying near your machine until you get more comfortable with your embroidery. But personally, I just enjoy watching it do its thing. So I tend to just sit here and enjoy the show. Now this machine is assuming that I'm going to change the color for every single letter. I'm not, so I'm just going to hit OK and have it keep going. Okay, we are done with our stitching out our embroidery design. As you can see, it says Singer Sewing. So now that we are done, it automatically cuts my thread for me. I'm going to lift the foot, and then I'm going to fold this fabric back. And this little part right here that clipped, or made a little snap noise when we put it into place, we just push this down and gently pull to release the hoop from the arm. Now, as we remove the hoop, we still want to make sure that we are clearing this foot right here. So I'm going to just lift that a little higher to get it nice and cleared. And my hoop has been safely removed from my embroidery machine. And now we can take our design out of the hoop. Okay, so here is our design still in the hoop. You can see that there's still a few little threads connecting the letters because I did not stop between each one to trim the threads before it went on to the next one. So you can do that now, or you can wait until you take it out of the hoop. I find it a little easier to take it out of the hoop first. So let's do that. So first we need to locate where our spring is, right here, spring release. We're gonna open that, which releases the tension between the inside and outside pieces of our hoop. So we can take this one and set it aside. And now our fabric is free from the hoop. I always like to put them right back together so I don't lose the pieces, and I like to secure them by tightening the screw when I'm done using them for safe storage. Alright, so now that I'm done with this hoop, I can set it aside. All right, so let's look at our design here. You can see where the hoop was. This is what I was mentioning before. Depending on what you're hooping, you may not want to put the fabric through the hoop, okay? Like I showed you with the dress. On the back side here, you can see my sticky stabilizer. This is that tearaway. So what I'm going to do is just remove this excess. And it's going to tear away around my design. There we go. So that's the bulk of it. There we go. If you want to take some time to kind of pick around the rest of it and go through the letters, you absolutely can. That's up to you. My letters are going to be nice and secure on this denim fabric. And this is going to look really nice. If I wanted to stitch, make a little tote bag or something out of this, this would be super cute for me to take to work. Now that it's out of the hoop, I can go in a little easier to catch these threads and trim the threads between the letters, just like that. All right, so we stitched out Singer Sewing on this sample of denim fabric that I had. And I think it turned out fabulous, and it was so easy. It's all about setting yourself up for success with the right stabilizer, the right thread, and setting your machine and hooping it correctly. So now that I've stitched this out, I could totally turn this into like a little zipper pouch for all of my little sewing notions to keep up with them all. So I think I may do that. Now, it's not every day that you're going to embroider a piece of fabric to turn into something. A lot of people like to embroider on things that they already have, like say this chambray dress here. And I showed you earlier how to hoop it with the sticky tearaway. So let me show you how to put it on the machine, because we do have a lot of bulk here. What's the best way to go about doing that? So let's go back over to the machine and we're going to show you how to hoop that real quick. Okay, so we have our hoop and our dress. This is a longer dress, so there's a lot of fabric and sleeves and everything in here, but I have my fabric attached to the sticky stabilizer here, and under here is where I need to attach the hoop to the machine just like we did before. So this is another situation, and I kind of zoomed it out so you can see like the whole picture here, but I'm going to carefully get my hoop under my presser foot, use that extra lift to clear my foot and my needle. Okay, now I've got all this fabric here, so I'm going to kind of lift this up and over the hoop for a second, and I'm going to find this and slide it into place. Until it clicks. There we go. Now that it's clicked in place here, I need to get all of this away from where I'm stitching out. So I'm going to make sure that all of this drapes carefully over this arm. And my fabric is still in place right here on my sticky stabilizer. Now, when you are starting to go through the embroidery process, there may be points where you want to kind of hold this up. You do not want to put weight on like your hand on this or anything while it's moving. You want to leave this free. So you may need to hold this up as it's stitching. It's a very lightweight dress, so it's probably fine for me to leave it laying across here as well. But I do want to make sure that it has the ability to move freely, okay? Now, as I mentioned before, this is actually really sticking very well to this sticky stabilizer because it's a thin, lightweight, non-stretch chambray material. But if I had a material like that canvas tote I embroidered, it's a little thicker. I actually did a basting stitch around where I was going to be doing my design to make sure that this material didn't slide or move or anything during my embroidery design. So now all I would need to do is select my design, make sure it aligns with where I want it to go on my fabric, and then stitch it out. And then the removal process would be the same as before, where you push this little button and you slide the hoop out. And then all I would have to do is remove the hoop by removing the spring here. Now I still have my sticky stabilizer attached to my fabric as if I had my embroidery design already stitched out, and then I can remove, just like I did before. It's that simple. Something worth noting is as I removed this, you can see where my sticky stabilizer part was, where my non-sticky was, and there's absolutely no sticky residue on my hoop, which is extremely important to keep this, the hoop always looking and working very nicely. All right, so I just showed you some really helpful information in this tutorial about embroidery. We just scratched the surface. There's a lot to it if you really want to dive in and do some really fun stuff. And to kind of get your inspiration spark going, I want to show you something really cool. Now, this is just another stabilizer I haven't shown you yet today, and it may look similar to some of the others, but this is actually a water-soluble stabilizer. It's almost like a fabric. It feels like it's very thin and lightweight in texture and everything, but it dissolves in the water. So why would you want to use something like this? Well, you can hoop it, stitch out a design, take it out of the hoop, wash it away, and you're left with the stitches. And what you're left with are really cool little things like this if you want to do some little designs like this. I mean, aren't these adorable? A colleague of mine made these for me as a gift, and I love them. And you might be wondering, well, what are they? Let me show you. They're for decoration on my machine. It doesn't really serve a purpose other than it brings me joy, and it's really cute, and I love to put them on my sewing machine. So I have a big one and a small one, and you can make more of these or other types of designs and with a washable wash away stabilizer. Yeah, so this is embroidery. I hope this gets your wheels turning, the inspiration spark burning, and you're excited about embroidery beyond just doing fabrics or garments or totes and pouches. I hope it gets you thinking about all the other things you can do with embroidery. If you don't already have an embroidery machine, you definitely can check out the Singer Legacy SE300 over at singer.com. And I hope you're enjoying our summer sewing camp series with my friends and my colleagues Amanda and Meredith. I know you're learning lots from them as well. Thank you for tuning in. Again, my name's Bethany with Singer Sewing Company, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Happy sewing.